In this video, I'm going to be going over selections within Photoshop. Selections are a very fundamental concept because they allow you to pick and isolate the things you want in Photoshop to edit. So in this video, I'm going to be going over what selections are and how to make them, what to use selections for, and I'm going to be going over a variety of tools within Photoshop that can allow you to make selections way more efficiently. So let's jump into Photoshop. So first off, we got this beautiful image of the San Francisco bridge here. And we're just gonna make a very basic selection here. So we'll start with the marquee tool here, and we'll drag and create a square. And this right here is a selection. So you can go ahead and drag that around and move it to wherever you want. These edges right here are called marching ants, and that allows you to see what is selected. If you want to deselect, you can simply click Select, Deselect, or you can hit Control D. Another thing you can do is invert a selection. So say I make this selection here, and I want to actually select everything outside of this square here. So I can either go to Select Inverse, or I can hit Control Shift I, and it will now select everything except for what is in this square here. Another thing I could do is if I don't like seeing all these marching ants, I can hit Control H and it will get rid of them. This still allows me to move that selection around, as you can see, but if I let go, they will disappear. So with that being said, I will still have to hit Control D to deselect off of that. The next thing I want to show you is the options bar here, which will pop up when you click one of these main selection tools. So the first option I want to show you is this Add to Selection button. So say I have these rocks selected here, and I want to go ahead and add this bridge into it. I make sure this is selected, and I can just drag here, and it will now add the bridge into the selection. If I want to remove from the selection, say I want this rock out over here, I can drag like that, and it will now remove that chunk from the selection. I could also do a intersecting selection, which will only select where these two boxes are intersected. So it just selected that middle patch there. So that's the very basics of selection. So next step, you're probably wondering, what do I do with these selections? And this is where the adjustments can come into play. So let's say we select this part of the bridge here, and I want to brighten up this square. I go to Image Adjustments, Brightness Contrast, and now begin to up the brightness. And since this area is selected, that's the only part that will get this adjustment. Could also change the contrast if I wanted to. And now if I click OK and deselect, only that square will be selected. Now, as we talked about in the layers chapter, since we went up here to the image thing and did adjustments here, that adjustment is now baked into the image, and that's not an ideal situation. So what we can do is undo that, Control Z, deselect, and we can go ahead and try that again. So let's select this, and this time let's go ahead and add an adjustment layer to it. And as you can see, it applied that selection directly to the adjustment layer for me. So as we talked about in the masks section, white reveals and black conceals. So now if I make this adjustment here, only the white is going to appear there. And the great thing is that if I decide to turn this off, I can see what that adjustment looks like, and I can ultimately get rid of that if I need to. So that's where selections can help with making your masks more specific. Another thing you can do is you can save selections for later. So say I want to save this selection for whatever reason. Say it's exactly where I want it to be and I don't want to forget this. What I can do is go to the Channels panel here, which if you don't see, you can go to Window Channels, and I can click this button right here, which looks like the mask button, except now it says Save Selection as Channel. And now this Alpha 1 box will pop up, and this is that Save Selection. So don't worry about this RGB, red, green, and blue button. We'll get to that later. All you need to know is that this selection is now saved. So if I hit Control D and I want to now reload this selection, all I do is do Control click and it's going to pop up there. Alternatively, I could also click on this and go to load selection right here. And that will now load that selection. One key to making this show up is that you want all 4 of these to have visibility and you don't want your selection to have visibility. So now that we know the basic fundamentals of selections, let's get into some more unique selection tools, because obviously using a rectangle isn't going to be the most applicable tool for the types of images we're going to be editing. But for the sake of that argument, I'm going to go ahead and show you real quick where you might actually use a rectangular marquee tool. So if you have a perfectly flat horizon like this, you can go ahead and select this top half here, click Control T, which is transform, and now if I drag this up, I can make that lightning way bigger and more dramatic. Click OK, and now we have a massive lightning strike. So the second tool we have here is the elliptical marquee tool, which is exactly like the rectangular, except it is circular. So let's go back to this image here and create an elliptical. So one thing I like to use this for is vignettes. I'm going to show you really quickly how to do this. It is a bit more advanced, but for the sake of this demo, I'm going to show you what you could use it for. So we're going to go ahead and create a new adjustment layer, curves. Going to go ahead and invert that, set the blend mode to multiply, if I can get this to load. And then we're going to go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, 420% pixel radius. And now we have a nice vignette based off of where that elliptical tool was. There's also 2 more tools in here, the single row and single column, but they simply create a single row, and I haven't really found any use in landscape photography for that, so I never use it. The next selection tool I want to go over is the Lasso tool right here. So if we click on that, you can now begin to freehand draw your selections. And if you have a steady hand and are a good drawer, this could be a selection that is beneficial to you. Personally, I don't use it very much because I'm not the best freehand drawer. And as we're going to see later on, there's tools that are a bit easier to use if I want to select something like a rock here. But that Lasso tool is available if you do need it. Some other tools under the Lasso section are the polygonal lasso tool, which allow you to draw and connect points to whatever shape you want. Another tool is the magnetic lasso tool, which if you begin to drag along a horizon, it will try to find points to link your selection up to. I personally don't ever use this tool because I have found it's kind of clunky, but it's there if you need it. So now let's move on to the real money-making tools. And first off, we got the quick selection tool. So essentially, if I want to select this rock, it will go ahead and automatically select it for me. It is really good at finding the edges of things for you and adjusting them. It's also great if you want to get rid of certain things. So say it also selected this rock. One thing I could do is go up to this minus sign right here and then start drawing again, and it will begin to start deselecting that rock. Say I want to go back and add it again, or perhaps I want to add this rock up here into it, I can click the plus button here and begin dragging. So now that we got that selected here, I can go ahead and create an adjustment for that. If I want to adjust, say, the brightness of that or the contrast or any of these other adjustments here, which we're going to go over in a different chapter. Honestly, this is probably the selection tool you're going to be using the most. Another tool that you might use is the object selection tool, which is fairly similar, except now you can drag a box around the object you want to select, and Photoshop will try to find an object within there to select. And as you can see, that did a pretty good job. Another tool is the magic wand tool, which is fairly similar to the other one, except it gets textures into play a bit more. I don't end up using it as much because, as you can see, it didn't do a very good job of selecting that entire rock. It more got some of the colors and textures. But the magic wand tool does have its uses in various situations, which you may have to experiment with to see how they work better. I don't really ever use it. So some of the more advanced tools you might use are in the selection menu up here. And let's start with color range. So color range allows me to select certain colors based off of this sample. So say I want this red from the bridge to be selected. I can adjust how much of that red I want to with the fuzziness here. And let's say I want to isolate it just to that bridge area there. And I can hit OK. And now that bridge will be selected for me. So if I create an adjustment to that for saturation, I can now just adjust that bridge. And as you can see, we'll make this full screen. You can see that that mask is only isolating the bridge, which makes this a very powerful tool for selecting colors. Another thing you can do, let's go ahead and undo that. Under the color range is you can add more colors. So say I want to now add this oranges color into it. I can click the plus tool and now it will begin to add everything that's that color. And as you can see, that was a lot of stuff because there's a lot of sand in here. But say I wanted to do that. I can now hit OK and it will select all of that. Very powerful tool. The next selection option I want to get into is focus area. And this selection really only works well if you have something that's very specifically in focus. So any item that has a lot of depth of field, for example, this leaf right here. So let's go ahead and click focus area here. Give it a second to load. And as you can see, it only selected the leaf. If I want to increase the focus range a bit, I can now begin to add the bottom of that leaf. So if I click OK, I now have that leaf in a selection ready to be used for whatever. So say I want to decrease the contrast in that, I can make that a bit less contrasty. Easy enough, right? The next selection I want to go over is the subject selection. And this is a selection that mainly works well with people. I wouldn't really use it for any other kind of selection unless it's a very, very specific subject. So as you can see, that did an actually really nice job selecting this Lucha Libre dude right here. As you can see though, it's not perfect. It didn't get the thumb in it. His hair isn't completely selected and it missed these corners right here. So this is where I'm going to get into making very specific selections. And if you notice that the selection isn't perfect, you can go up to select and click select and mask. And this is going to bring you up into an editor where you can make your selection very specific. So there's a bunch of different ways to view this. I always click the red overlay. So this goes ahead and shows that anything that isn't red is going to be selected. So now if I go over here and click this third one down, I can begin to draw the parts of the selection that I want more. And as you can see, I have plus selected, which means I want to add to the selection. So I'm going to draw this part in right there. Get rid of that. I want that in the selection. And I could also go up to his finger here, zoom in, and start to draw this finger in a bit. And if I go over, I can hit minus and get a little bit closer with this finger here. And that should be good enough for this example here. Another tool I can use is for the hair here. So as you can see, the hair isn't perfect. And if I go ahead and select this tool, the second one down, this one will start to recognize the hair. And if I draw this, it is now going to refine those very, very specific edges for me and make them a lot more detailed. So we'll just draw this along here. And get that edge looking nifty. And as you can see, that edge is now looking near perfect on there. So now let's click OK. And now we have a near perfect selection of this dude that I can put into a selection mask. So now we can increase the brightness or decrease the brightness of this dude or do other adjustments. Another example of the select and mask tool would be to select the sky here. So let's go ahead and do quick select tool and see what we get with this sky selection here. So as we can see, if we zoom in, we don't have the most perfect selection here. You can see it's a little bit finicky on the edges here. It didn't get these trees completely, and it's just not that great. So we can go to select and mask here, or you can also click it here. We'll go ahead and click it here this time. And let's go ahead and bring us back up to this menu. And if we use this second tool right here, which is the same tool we used for the hair on the other dude, we can go ahead and just drag right here, and it's gonna go ahead and make those selections in those very detailed areas for us. So I can just drag this along the line here and make this selection way more tidy. This is a great tool for all of those weird popping up things that might occur. So obviously I can go ahead and do this along the entire line here, but I will go ahead and say that is good for the sake of this selection. I also wanted to point out in the select and mask area, there are a lot of other tools that you can use to help select a little bit more refined. For example, you can change the refine mode from color to more object aware if you have big subjects. And you could also make the edge detection a little bit more detailed if you need to. As you can see, it's getting even more detailed there. You could also smooth, make it more feathered. See, now it's gonna be a bit more of a blurry edge. Obviously that wouldn't be that great in this case. Or you can adjust, the contrast and all of this stuff. So let's go ahead and say that's good for now. And now we have a perfect selection of that, honestly not very existent sky, but this was a great example image. So let's go ahead and make a adjustment here. And, and if we decrease the brightness a little bit, we can make that sky a bit more atmospheric. Yeah, see, made a little bit of a difference there. So that is a great way to use the select and mask tool. One last tool I wanted to show you is the sky selection tool. So pretty obvious, but this will just go ahead and select the sky for you. You're probably wondering why we didn't go do that in the mountain example there, but I really wanted to show you how the select and mask tool could be beneficial. So that is why we didn't do that back there. As you can see, this did a pretty good job. It thinks some of this snow here is the sky, so we can go ahead and hop back into select and mask and go ahead and edit that again. Let's make sure this second one is selected, minus, because we want to get that out. And then we could go ahead and then draw this back in where it is messing that up. Obviously, this might take a little bit of time to do, but you get the point. So now you can see, now we have a much better selection along that edge there. So that is how selections work within Photoshop. Pretty easy once you start to get the hang of it, but it does take a little bit of time to begin to learn those tools and figure out how to use them perfectly for your case. So don't give up hope if you start to get a little bit frustrated. You just gotta practice and eventually you will get good at it, just like any other kind of art form. So let's go ahead and jump into the next video.